Welcome to Eritech. Another important aspect of a trade war is the potential shift in consumer sentiment. As the prices of goods rise and economic conditions worsen, the public's perception of these tariffs can change, leading to political pressure on government leaders. While some voters may support tariffs as a means of protecting American jobs, others may start to feel the economic pain, leading to a shift in public opinion. Politicians will have to balance these competing interests, especially as midterm elections or presidential races approach, creating a tense political environment around trade policies. As tariffs continue and trade wars escalate, long-term shifts in global alliances and investment patterns are likely to occur. Countries may seek new trade partners or relocate their manufacturing to avoid punitive tariffs, leading to the reshaping of global supply chains. If the U.S. makes itself less attractive as a trade partner due to these policies, other countries may look for opportunities to forge new trade agreements with China or Europe. This shifting dynamic could alter the global economic landscape and change the way businesses think about global operations and market access. Trade wars don't just affect the countries directly involved, they also have a ripple effect on other nations. As tariffs increase between the U.S. and Canada, countries that rely on stable trade relations between these two will be caught in the crossfire. For example, nations in Europe or Asia that do business with the U.S. or Canada might face increased costs and decreased demand for their goods, causing a slowdown in their economies as well. The interconnectedness of global trade means that a problem in one area can quickly spread worldwide. Trade wars can quickly escalate, and the uncertainty they create can destabilize both countries' economies. As countries retaliate and impose more tariffs, the situation becomes more unpredictable. For example, Canada might start targeting U.S. iconic products like bourbon or agricultural goods. As the conflict deepens, both nations could suffer severe economic consequences, and the effects on global trade could be widespread. Oil is Canada's #1 export to the U.S., and any tariff on oil would hurt both economies. Canada produces the type of oil that U.S. refineries need, and a trade war over oil could have serious consequences for both nations. Canada could retaliate by imposing tariffs on oil exports or even cutting off supply entirely, which would severely disrupt the U.S. energy market. Canada's economy is heavily reliant on exports to the U.S., with nearly 78% of Canadian exports going to its southern neighbor. A 25% tariff would make Canadian goods more expensive, and U.S. consumers might buy less. In fact, even a more moderate tariff could cause Canada's GDP to drop by a significant amount. The automotive industry in Canada is particularly vulnerable, since vehicles are one of the country's top exports to the U.S. While tariffs hurt consumers by driving up prices, they also bring money into the U.S. Treasury. These tariffs would generate significant revenue, potentially in the hundreds of billions of dollars. This money could be used to fund various government projects, including military expenses, border control, or even tax cuts. However, the benefits of these tariffs might take time to materialize, while other nations, like Canada, face more immediate economic pain. Trump's broader goal behind these tariffs is to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S., making it more self-sufficient. By taxing imports, he aims to incentivize U.S. companies to produce goods domestically. The idea is that these tariffs will ultimately lower prices for U.S. consumers while creating jobs in manufacturing industries. For manufacturers that rely on both Canadian and U.S. production facilities, tariffs can significantly impact their supply chains. Companies will have to adjust or face paying tariffs on parts multiple times, making the cost of manufacturing in North America much more expensive. This might force companies to reconsider their supply chains altogether, possibly moving production to the U.S. to avoid the tariffs. The auto industry is an excellent example of how tariffs can disrupt complex global supply chains. Car components are often made in different countries and cross borders multiple times during production. For example, the engine might come from one country while the transmission comes from another. Every time these parts cross a border, a tariff would be imposed, raising the cost of producing cars. This could cause serious disruptions in the automotive industry and lead to higher prices for consumers. A 25% tariff could lead to a drop in the U.S. GDP as consumers' purchasing power shrinks. When prices rise, consumers have less money to spend on non-essential goods and services, which ultimately leads to lower overall economic activity. Since consumer spending accounts for nearly 70% of US GDP, any reduction in spending can have a serious impact on the economy. A clear example of this inflationary effect was seen in 2018, when Trump imposed tariffs on washing machines. While the tariffs directly targeted imported washing machines from companies like LG and Samsung, even domestic manufacturers raised their prices in response. This created a ripple effect, causing the prices of dryers to increase as well, even though they weren't part of the tariff scheme. This shows that tariffs can cause prices to go up not only for imported goods but for domestically produced items as well. If Trump proceeds with these 25% tariffs, inflation in the US is expected to rise. The logic behind this is simple. Tariffs are a tax on imported goods, but the cost of these taxes is ultimately passed on to US consumers. A business importing products from Canada or Mexico will have to pay the tariff, and that additional cost is often passed on to the consumer in the form of higher prices. For example, a product that used to cost $100 might now cost $125 after the tariff. And with the markup included, the final price could be much higher. Canada has made it clear that they will retaliate against any tariffs placed on them by the US. This means that, while the US threatens tariffs, Canada is prepared to respond in kind with its own countermeasures. The message is clear. Tariffs placed on Canadian goods will not come without consequences. Canadian leaders have promised to hit US exports where it hurts the most. Before and after becoming president, Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to impose steep tariffs on goods coming into the United States from countries like Canada and Mexico. His claims focus on what he believes are unfair trade practices and border issues, with particular emphasis on the flow of people and drugs. If these tariffs were implemented, up to 25%, Americans could face rising prices on everyday goods like food, medicine, cars, and construction materials.